Hey gang, we are at the Windridge Memorial Nature Park and Sanctuary here in Cary, Illinois. This is actually where we did that visit of the kids that were killed in the school bus crash. Here, it is a beautiful cemetery. It's like an arboretum actually, and we're going to talk about probably the most famous case that is still unsolved in Cincinnati. Still unsolved, back from 1966. It was on the west side of Cincinnati where it happened, this horrible crime. Father Gerald, Jerry, was 28 years old. His wife, Linda, was 23 years old, and they had a little daughter, Deborah, who was 4 years old. Now, Jerry worked for Monsanto, and Mom had been a stewardess. They called it back then, we call that flight attendant today. But Dad was supposed to pick up his co-worker for a flight to work on a Monday morning, and he just never showed up. Finally, a couple of days later or so, after noticing there was no activity and getting suspicious, a neighbor, Dick Meyer, got into the house to just check up on them. He had smelled the odor of death, and because of his war experience, he knew what that smelled like. He just turned around and called the police in tears. He knew they were dead. The police came, the investigators, and they finally made it to the master bedroom where Jerry was laying on his stomach. He had 9 stab wounds. He'd been stabbed 4 times in the back, 2 times in the head, and 3 times in the neck, and a sock had been stuffed into his mouth. Wrist marks showed that both adults had been bound with a rope or possibly adhesive tape. A small amount of that tape was found around his mouth, perhaps to hold that sock in place. Both the rope and the tape had been removed from the scene, though, by the killer. Now, Linda was on top of Jerry. She was facing up with 10 stab wounds. It is said that she was raped, but maybe not. We'll talk about that. Daughter, Debbie, you would think she would have survived, but no, she was found in her bedroom with 4 stab wounds. 4 stab wounds that were so deep that they went completely through her body. It is presumed that the kitchen knife, there was a kitchen knife missing, one of the carving knives, and it's presumed that was the murder weapon. It was never found. Now, 2 very interesting things to note here about the crime scene in the processing. And the first is that there was some veterinary tape found on Jerry's body. Now, that's very odd, very unique. Also, the family dogs were medically sedated. They were put in the basement and given some type of veterinary drugs. And marking on the evidence bag showed that there was hair samples that matched up with the local town veterinarian, a Dr. F.G. Leininger. Well, that's pretty incriminating. And then you can tie in the fact when the news came out and people started talking that there was rumors that Linda Bricca was having an affair with Dr. Fred and that she wanted to call it off. She had worked for this doctor part-time It was at Glenway Animal Clinic, the clinic that he owned. When they interviewed the doctor, he was unsurprised, rather clinical in his tone, and he did not want to cooperate in any way with authorities. Of course, he wouldn't give any samples of his hair or anything, DNA. DNA wouldn't really be a factor for a while, but if maybe there was DNA, that's a whole nother subject. Now, what's interesting is the doctor committed suicide in 2004. He was 73 years old at the time. His wife, Lynn Nadine, died the same year. It said that maybe they committed suicide together, but that's not been confirmed. She was 74, by the way. Does not show a death date for her when I looked in Find a Grave, but anyway, the question is, was it the doctor? All kinds of theories started coming up. People think it had to be two people. How could you overpower a guy like Jerry, a guy that was a top swimmer? He was in shape. He's only 28 years old, strapping guy. There's no way. But then people say, well, if the killer had a gun and he kept the family at bay, yeah, I could buy that. Went through a methodical process of killing the family. That's happened many times. There were other theories also. Killing the girl. Why kill the girl? She probably knew him. That's the most likely reason. Before the murders, interesting, there were two flight attendants who had worked with Linda that were attacked and beaten in Seattle. One was killed, the other was beaten so badly that she had no memory of the attack. And Linda was afraid. She had actually told a neighbor, babysitter for Debbie, not to let her go outside by herself. And this was just before the murders. She had said something about this drug case, a drug deal, while she was working for the airlines. Another theory is it could have been just a random killing. There was a stabbing death of a 21-year-old socialite, Valerie Percy, who was the daughter of U.S. Senate Charles Percy, at their North Shore mansion 3 weeks before this happened. Now, as of last year, 2020, they reopened the case. Well, they brought it out a cold case. Hamilton County Detective Brian Williams and Detective Douglas Todd have gone back to square one. They say they are going to resubmit fingerprints in hopes of finding a match. Technology that couldn't be done 50 years ago. Maybe the DNA evidence. And folks, let me tell you, the DNA evidence is more blood. More of a blood, did the killer accidentally stab themselves? So we are approaching the family plot here of the family. You can see the row I'm walking on is made for walking. All the interments are on opposite side. That is the family plot right here. Well, let's start with Gerald here. Gerald John, 1938 to 1966. And then between we have Little Deborah, 1962 to 1966. And then we have here Linda Jane, 1942 to 1966. And then the parents, I believe, of Linda, Adolph, the father, and June Miller Bulaw. And I think they're all buried here because the parents lived in this area. So what do you guys think? Do you think it was the doctor? Or do you think it was a conspiracy, a drug deal? I'm kind of leaning to the doctor. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. And we'll see what the detectives come up with. Maybe they will solve it. So, rest in peace, family. Rest in peace.